All right, everyone. Thank you for joining Heal Thyself for another episode, a really good one. It's Dr. G, and I want to just express some gratitude. I haven't done it in a while, and I just want to tell everyone I'm very grateful to have you all listening and supporting the show. We've done it for quite a while. And for all of you who've been listening since day one, that's amazing. All of the new listeners, amazing. And thank you for spreading this show to so many people. Remember, as I said on episode 1, it's all about this informed consent, right? Taking that information, empowering yourself, the empowerment portion, and then making change, right? Making change to your life, making change to your loved one's life. And that's the goal. It's always been the goal. All right, today's show is going to be on sleep hygiene. What does it mean? How do we get to bed earlier? And how do we sleep through the night efficiently, right? So sleep hygiene is really important, something we ignore. And then we have a really good guest. Tana is going to be talking about codependency, attachment, trauma from when we were kids. It's going to be such a good conversation. So I'm really excited for that. So without further ado, let's get to this knowledge bomb. Sleep hygiene, what does it even mean? All right. So last episode, you'll remember I spoke about the things I do during my day, right? To get my day going, to get the blood flowing, to set myself up for success in that day. But the sleep portion is just as important, right? Setting yourself up for bed, for rejuvenation, right? To refresh yourself for the next day, right? It's a cycle. So important, sleep hygiene, to pay attention, right? So what I say about sleep hygiene is this. It's sleep behavior. The easiest way to say it, sleep behavior. Setting your body and your mind up for a good night's sleep, right? And we set ourselves up for this better sleep. It can make a difference too. So think about it. When was the last time that you truly wound down for bed? Really wound down? It might be yesterday, but a lot of us don't. A lot of us just are on our phones to the last minute, working to the last minute, finishing a movie, brushing our teeth, and going to sleep, right? What happens is the brain needs that time to wind down, right? The nervous system needs the time to put ourselves in a place to get a good night's sleep. So, I remember in college, I used to study till the last minute, right? To the very last minute, especially because if I had a test coming up. Study till the last minute, I get to bed, and then all of a sudden, I'm still doing mnemonic devices in my head in bed, just trying to memorize some anatomy. So really, it's just your brain can't go from go, go, go to get in bed. Okay, now stop. All right. So let's keep that in mind and start really nourishing and nurturing that part of us. So what happens when we get poor sleep in general, right? Neurologically, we know we're going to have lapses in attention. I know you all felt this because everyone inevitably had poor sleep or sleeps poorly. Lapses in attention, your memory is not sharp, right? You have poor thought put, meaning that your just thoughts aren't coming out efficiently and effectively, right? Sympathetic nervous system, that's more active, right? So you're in more fight or flight, and that reflects other physiological processes too. Metabolically, what do we see? Well, reduced glucose tolerance, right? So all of a sudden your blood sugar is elevated throughout the day. You're in a pre-diabetic state, elevated blood pressure. What about your hormones? All right, well, reduce leptin. What does that mean? That hormone that suppresses your hunger, well, that's reduced. So all of a sudden you're hungry. You want to eat more, right? And if think about it chronically, poor sleep can actually lead to weight gain and obesity, right? Disruptions in cortisol and melatonin, that cycle, of course, right? The cycle, the elegant cycle between melatonin and cortisol as they're antagonizing each other, right? So you want that cortisol really high in the morning, melatonin really low, and vice versa at night. But that's going to be disrupted if you have a cycle of poor sleep. Mood changes, we know that. You're moody, you're depressed, you're anxious, you're angry, you're irritable. That's all coming with poor sleep. How about your immune system? We see altered immune function, right? Your white blood cells, they're not working the way they used to, or the way they should be, right? That's just poor sleep, one night even. And systemically, we see overall increased inflammation. And if you do this chronically with this poor sleep situation, all of a sudden that increased inflammation is leading to increased risk of cardiovascular events, right? So sleep is it's everything, right? So we have to optimize our sleep. And shutting down can be difficult for some of us, right? Like if you remember Sahara Rose on this show, she had said, you are a Christian, you're a Vata, right? And Vatas are very wind oriented. They kind of just, their mind is on one thing and it flows to the other and it flows to the other. They're not super grounded. So for me, it's always been difficult to kind of wind down, especially for folks who are cerebral. They're always thinking, always thinking. So I've always envied people who can just lay down in bed and pass out, which is wild to see. I just never understood that. And many of you listening can do that, and God bless you, but many of us can't. So we require this nice routine, right? So there's a way that our brain basically talks to our body, and it says, hey, sleep is coming, and it works as one, right? And if you do this nightly, remember, body and brain love routine. So if you're giving the body the proper signals to calm down, physiologically, everything goes to rest, right? Your hormones start going down, right? Your nervous system goes into parasympathetic, right? That rest, that digest. And you need about 30 minutes to an hour of this prep time. Right, so you heard me on the last show talk about journaling, and you can do this at night, and here's why. You can transfer the worries and all the occurrences and events during the day and put it on paper so you don't have to think about them before bed, right? It's a really beautiful process. When you spit them out on paper, they're not in your head anymore. So this is a really good practice for folks who are really in their head before bed, and it's something that I do when I had a million things running through my head and before bed. So, and it's also even a good practice for people who wake up during the night, having a journal right next to you, waking up and being like, oh my God, I have an idea, or I'm worried about this, and writing it out and saying, okay, it's out on paper. I'm going to read it and look at it the next morning. That puts your head at rest. That puts your body at rest. So not letting your mind run with these ideas is really important. Keeping the journal by your bed or journaling before bed. Sleep hygiene number 2. Environment is everything. It's everything, right? You gotta set the mood, right? It's not just for intimacy, it's for your own sleep. You wanna set the mood. Turn the lights down low, right? Light disruption is the number one issue that we're looking at with disrupted sleep. So if you have blue blockers, which I do suggest, get them on, right? They're a little goofy, but put them on at night. Because light at night, that's not right? You wanna make sure your melatonin is not disrupted. And it is disrupted if you're exposed to that light at night, and the blue, especially the blue light, right? So disruption of your rhythm, right? And your sleep is not going to be optimized. And what's happening is that's potentially even leaking over into the morning and disrupting your cortisol. So now it's leaking into your day. So now your day ain't right? So get yourself a Himalayan salt lamp. I have one of those. Those are really nice, right? The lux intensity is not going to disrupt your circadian rhythm, which is really nice, but it's also very calming and very warming. So make sure you have one. Put one in your room and see if it's helping set the mood for your sleep, right? You want your room when you're sleeping nice and dark as it gets. And this is why I always recommend blackout curtains. You don't want any ambient light coming in, right? Because that ambient light is going to be an issue. It's going to be an issue to disrupt your sleep cycle. And it's also, and if you remember, I did a breast cancer show, I talked about ambient light being a predisposition for cancer, which you might go, why? I don't understand. Well, if you think about what it does, it disrupts melatonin, and melatonin is actually one of your most potent anti-cancer hormones at night. So we want to think about how do we reduce and shut out all that ambient light and sleep in a dark room, all right? Do this little test. Try turning on candles once you're done with dinner. Turning off all the lights in your house and just putting candles everywhere. No other light at all. And do this for 3 days and see if your sleep changes or resets, right? You're going to actually see that you're getting tired way sooner than usual, right? I did this, my friend, when I was at her place, she put on the candles after dinner, and by 9 p.m. I was ready for bed, right? And that's really early for me typically. I'm up at 12 o'clock. So temperature, really important. You want to keep it cool in your house, nothing above 72, right? You want a colder core body temperature. This is really important because the higher the core body temperature, the poorer the melatonin, right? The poorer melatonin output, the poorer the sleep. What about music? This is something that I love. You know, if you listen to my show, you hear me talk about how I play it all day. But I usually stop it around 30 minutes to an hour before when I do these, nighttime rituals or this sleep hygiene. But before I play very slow music, low BPM. Remember I talked about last week having higher beats per minute music to get you going, right? Because that induces a physiological change. Well, do the opposite, right? Now you're having something with lower volume like classical atmospheric music, which is putting your body in a state. And then once you're ready to do these nighttime rituals, just turn it off, right? Honor your space. Bed should only be for sex and sleep, period. Your brain and your body need to make that distinction always. there's something subconscious that happens when you understand I'm either here for sex or I'm either here for sleep, but I ain't here to eat, and I'm not here to scroll, and I'm not here to work on my laptop. Really make it a sacred place for you. And if you have oil diffusers, now's the time to put it on. Get those oil diffusers. We did a essential oil show. I talked about the best ones out there. If you have a diffuser, start diffusing that nighttime oil that really helps you sleep, like lavender. So brain stimulation, right? This is why I say no to the phone. The electrical stimulation of not only colors, but those dopamine hits before bed are a no-no, right? This can be said the same about sending emails and thinking about a working strategy, right? No, no, no. The brain has to be in shutdown mode, right? That when you turn off your computer and you put it on shutdown mode or standby mode, that's how it has to be. It can't be in work mode. It can't be in scroll mode, okay? Reading's okay, but with that said, nothing heavy. Nothing super complex, nothing existential that you're going to think about who you are and why your life is the way it is before bed. This isn't the time. You want light reading, relaxed reading, put your brain in a nice place. Don't take in new concepts. This isn't the time. Do that during the day. All right. Movement. What about exercise? Well, exercise raises the core body temperature. So you want to stay away from it for about 3 to 4 hours, right? You want to make sure your core body temperature is low before bed. And exercise is not only stimulating that, but it's also stimulating cortisol release. And you want that during the day, but not at night. At night, your cortisol has got to be trending down. It's got to be a down slope, all right? So with that said, exercise is really important, though, at helping sleep. So you want to get it in during the day to set that cortisol to help you at night. We're not physiologically made to work out late at night, for sure. And I know that because I've tried that many times and it just never works. But you can do some light movement, light yoga, light stretching. All right, so meditation, this is where you can't go wrong. This is actually something that I do believe everyone should try in their sleep hygiene. Just make sure you're not doing it and falling asleep. I'm guilty of this sometimes. So you want to make sure you're doing your meditation and you're winding down, but you're not going to fall asleep. And if you have a problem falling asleep, then just do it during the day. But if you can do meditation at night, it's really helpful because I mentioned it last week about it changing the structure of the brain, right? Learning and memory, those centers in your brain thicken, right? But then fear, anxiety, stress, they start reducing those parts of the brain. Remember, the brain is neuroplastic. But the key is this is going to be really helpful for folks who have issues falling asleep and their mind is running. Why? Because consistent meditation over time helps decrease this area called the self-referential center. That's the monkey mind. That's your voice that talks to you that's not real, but really keeps you going. And that's that voice that talks to you at night. So if you have trouble falling asleep because your mind is running, meditation is going to be your number one remedy, period. Okay? Showering at night. What about that? So I usually shower before bed. It's part of my ritual, right? You remember I said something about raising your core body temperature. And if you take a hot shower, it may elevate your core body temperature, but really your core body temperature is going to be elevated through things like prolonged exercise, right? Sauna, which is a big no-no before bed. Don't do sauna before bed. And showers, I don't think do enough. I think it's more in the periphery that it's raising, but nothing. I don't think it's doing enough in the core. So and we spoke to. I asked this question to the sleep expert Michael Bruce, which he came in, and he said actually there is a little increase in temperature, but when you come out, the drop to cold is actually really helpful because that drop to cold is stimulating that melatonin release. So if you take a shower before bed, or at night, that's okay. Just make sure that you're not going from a hot shower to a hot room to a hot bed, right? You want that temperature drop from the shower to out of the shower, okay? What about some supplements, right? Remember, this isn't medical advice. Ask your doctor about this, but here are some really good supplements that I myself have used that help me with sleep. And if you know me, like I have a lot of energy come 8 o'clock. And I mean, we did those archetypes with Dr. Michael Bruce about what our sleep type is, right? And there's the bear, there's the dolphin, there's the wolf. I'm missing one more. And there's a lion, okay? So for me, it's a type that's more, their mind is really running at night. And that's when they get a lot of work done. Okay. So I needed to put a lot more intention and energy into making sure that I'm setting the stage for good sleep. And a lot of these things do work for me, but I do need to use some supplements to help me put me in a place where my body is like, all right, thank you. Your mind's relaxed. Now my body's relaxed. All right. So here's some of my favorite supplements. Magnesium glycinate. All right. Very simple, very gentle, overall pretty safe for everyone. Right. Glycinate is a form, magnesium glycinate is a form because that glycinate, the glycine amino acid is really calming amino acid to the nervous system. Remember I talked about nervous system, you want it in parasympathetic. Really rest, digest, relaxed. Passion flower. Passion flower, I love this. And I do love lavender. Passion flower can help stimulate the release of GABA. And if you remember, I spoke about GABA on another show. GABA is amazing, right? It's helpful and relaxing before bed. It's a neurotransmitter that it tells our whole body, relax, you're good. The day is done. So passion flower is amazing. And it's a beautiful flower. Google passion flower and just look at it. I'm sure you've seen it before, but it's a beautiful flower. Valerian is a really good one. It's got a really distinct smell. So if you're sensitive to smells, valerian might not be the one for you, but it actually helps. It's helpful in reducing the time to fall asleep. So if you have issues falling asleep, like in that time where you're sitting in bed and your mind's running, it can be helpful. Lavender, I mentioned before, as an essential oil, but also as an herb, can be really helpful because it slows the heartbeat, relaxes the muscle, induces slow wave sleep. That's a deep, deep sleep, the nourishing deep sleep, the one that is nourishing your hormones, nourishing the body, nourishing your immune system. That deep sleep is so important, and lavender is really helpful for that. Chamomile is wonderful. I know you all heard of it. There's chamomile tea. But you can also take it as an herb, and that's another calmative to the nervous system. And actually, it has a constituent in there that binds to receptors in the brain and helps initiate sleep. Chamomile is amazing. And one of my favorite ones that I know works for me personally is not an herb. It's seriphos. It's phosphatidylserine. And this works on something called the HPA axis, right? That's where the brain and the adrenal gland talk to each other. So if you're particularly stressed, right? And this is a really important thing. If you find yourself having, like I do, second winds at night, right? Come like 12 at night, 1 in the morning, you got a second wind and you can stay up till 4. Well, then you may have a disruption in that HPA axis, the way your brain and your adrenal gland talks to each other. So what you can do with this seriphos is it actually helps create a more efficient HPA axis, and it reduces that cortisol stress coming out from the adrenal, right? Though that's stress hormone. So what you could do is take it before dinner, and then you take it right before bed. And your bed has to be around 10 o'clock. So you take it before dinner, before bed, and what that's going to help do is help re-regulate that cycle of when your cortisol is released, so it's back to a healthy mode. So I know that's been super helpful. It's actually been one of the most helpful things for me because I do get second winds at night. My cortisol can be very much so disrupted because I like working at night. So think about it. And if these herbs sound really good for you, talk to your doctor. It might help you. But really, sleep hygiene is so simple, like 30 minutes to an hour. Look, I talked about creating a ritual for yourself, reading, right? Yoga, a little bit of light movement, meditation. You can do some breath work. Really important things, setting the stage, the lighting, supplements, essential oils. All of these things can help work together. And watch. Even if you sleep well, you might even sleep better if you start really putting some more intention, all right? So I wanted to talk to you about this. I mean, last week we did the day rituals. Now we got the night rituals. Now you all know everything that I'm doing, all the secrets. So start implementing it. If it helps you out, let me know. Write it in the reviews. Let us know how it helped. That was a knowledge bomb. I really can't wait to get to this conversation. It's going to be really good. I mentioned it's going to be about trauma, codependency, attachment, everything in between. It's going to be so, so good. So let's get to it. All right, everyone. Today's special guest, very special as always, Tana Espino. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist and a relationship coach. And this conversation is going to be amazing. I know it because we had a little chat before the cameras went on.
Yeah.
And we were vibing already, right?
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on here. So excited to talk about this topic.
Yeah. So people may not know how we met.
I was coming in and you were...
finishing.
Yes.
So for all of you who didn't listen to Organic Olivia's podcast, that was a really fun one, but you were on there too. And we had a little chat. As I was leaving, you were coming in. I said, well, what do you do? What are you going to talk about?
Yes.
And I've been trying to get you on the show. And finally.
Right. Finally, we're here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So why don't we just introduce the work that you do, and then we'll go into like all of the other stuff. But we just want to know, like, what are you doing out here?
Yes. So I'm from Los Angeles, specifically Pasadena, California, and I work with women specifically and couples, women who are, having codependent patterns in relationships, anxious ways of relating in relationships, past traumas, and I help them really connect with their bodies and heal all those things that might be impairing their way of relating with themselves and with others in relationships.
And it's great that you do that. Here's why. Because so many of us suffer with that.
Yes.
Right?
I am one of them. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It's incredible how we hold that stuff in our body and it affects our everyday and
Yes.
we don't even know,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
What are some of the like behaviors that you've noticed where people are completely in the dark and they're like, I had no idea that this root was there.
Right. Okay. So one of the ones that I could think of when we're talking about like codependent patterns in adults is we could say the people pleasing behaviors and difficulty in saying no and thinking like, oh yeah, this is just what I do. Like I put myself second and I have to put everyone else first. And especially in relationships, I see that often with my clients where it's like, oh yeah, this is just what I do. This is just what I've learned to do. I place myself second and I place my partners first. And I can't really say no because I don't want them to be upset with me.
Oh,
That's like
I've
one of the,
seen
like the
that
main
person.
themes. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and it's difficult because it's masked as like, oh, like I'm a very loving,
Yes.
selfless person, right?
Yes, I'm a giver, I'm a caretaker. And not that those qualities are negative at all. Like I think that's amazing and all of us have those qualities of just wanting to, be that caretaker and be giving, right? And it's not so much that that's like the negative thing. It's in the context of when you're chronically placing yourself last and losing yourself in the relationship and that it's difficult to say no because you feel like the person's going to reject you or abandon you or be upset with you. That's where the problem is. Not so much of like, I'm just giving and this is just how I am because that's amazing. But when you're noticing that, oh, I'm doing this because I'm fearful that my partner or whoever is going to abandon or reject me or be upset with me if I say no, right? That's where the issue is.
Yeah, and that can be really pathological, right? Because it's all
Yes.
of a sudden you're just your happiness is being cut short because you're living in fear,
Right.
right? And I always
Yes.
tell people like, and even in relationships, and I'm far from an expert in that, but I just say like, where are you coming from? Is it in a loving place? All of like, where are you operating from, love
Yes.
or
Or
within fear?
fear. Exactly.
Right? And the fear is coming.
Yes.
So we have folks now all of a sudden. So you're saying selfless and going, oh my God, like if I don't show up this way, my partner's gonna leave me.
Right. Or they'll be very upset with me and I want to avoid that.
Okay. And this is, would you say that that's one of the telltale signs of codependent behavior?
Yes, that's one of the signs of codependent behavior. Yeah. And the reason why that for someone who's experiencing that codependent pattern, in this case, if we're talking about people pleasing and thinking that they have to be selfless or else their partner is going to leave or be upset with them, is that that is like a survival for them, and it's really difficult to just say for someone to just say, well, just say no, just set the boundary. Just or whatever other suggestions they might have. It's difficult because that's rooted in survival. So it's really hard for that person to say no because they really think that they won't survive without this other person if they were to set a boundary, if they were to say no, and if their partner were to reject them.
And
Although
it's
that's a perceived fear also because we don't know if that's true, right? Like
right.
it's a perceived fear.
Yeah, which was created at some point after some sort of trauma, right?
Yes. So typically with codependency, someone who's exhibiting codependent patterns, they're going to have this some sort of child wounding in their past, some type of trauma. The trauma doesn't have to be really big as we think of like witnessing domestic violence or like maybe severe sexual or physical abuse. It could be that, but it could also be living with a parent who might have had extreme mental illness and things weren't stable in the home, or it could be having a parent or caregiver who was an addict or an alcoholic and they weren't emotionally present and just things were really unstable in the home.
And then it puts that person. So how does then? I'm trying to make this connection. So then, how
Yeah.
does that create a codependency? I would think if they're experiencing this trauma, they go within and they just become very, isolated, self-isolated rather than codependent.
Oh yeah, we see that later on too. But as children, so when I say children, let's say we're talking about the ages of like, I don't know, birth to like 9 or 10, maybe even younger. They want to connect with their parents. So they see their parents as like, my parents can't really do no wrong, even if like, let's say they're being abused or whatever it is. Like they really want to connect with their parents because that's their way of survival. Because if they're, if we're talking, let's say a 7-year-old who feels that if they don't mesh with what the family system's doing, then they're not going to be able to survive. They're like kind of kicked out of the family. When in reality they're not, but like they won't be able to survive. So they need to be in this enmeshed family unit to feel like they're surviving, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then they'll do anything, they'll adapt to survive to whatever it is that their environment is exhibiting.
Yeah. So even like from the outside looking in, they're a kid. They're not going to survive on the streets. But also, evolutionarily, they must have these biological
Yes.
cues where it says, okay, well, this is the situation. I have to evolve without even cerebrally
Right.
thinking it. They just adapt.
Yes, which is really amazing in a way if we're talking about like evolutionary and nervous system function where it's like, oh, we just natural, this is what we have to do to adapt and to survive. So it's like our bodies in a way are working for us in that way.
Like our body is literally the brain that's taking over, telling us that we adapt. Because I can't think of a 7-year-old cognitively going,
Right.
well, this is a situation.
Right. Yeah, because they don't have that type of abstract thinking at that
Right.
age. They're very much like, oh, things are. There are a little bit of egocentricity there with children. It's a normal development, and so a lot of the times it's like, oh, things are caused by me. I must have done this. So, what do I have to do to repair this? Which is part of the codependent pattern.
I see. And they start developing that. So are you saying that people who do exhibit codependency when they're older have a childhood where they have abusive parents, or is it not always abusive
It's not
parents?
always abusive.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not always. It could be abusive. It could be, the parent that is struggling with the substance use or addiction or alcoholism, or a parent who maybe has like extreme mental illness that can't really be there consistently for the child and keep them safe. So it could be any one of those, and maybe some others, but those are like the top ones that come up. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this abusive environment.
I see. I see. So now we have this child in this environment.
Yes.
And they've created these adaptive mechanisms to protect them in the form of
Yes.
codependency.
Yes.
Right. So as a kid, how does that look when they're a kid? Are they like attached to their parents, or are they just?
Well, that's interesting because now you're bringing up a little bit of the attachment styles, which is very different from codependency.
I see.
Although some people might mix the two up, like anxious attachment and codependency are this one and the same, and that's not really true. But if we're talking about, how does this look like in children? It looks like the child's pretty much kind of being, in a way, very aware of what's happening in the environment and trying to do the best that they can to bring in homeostasis, I guess we could say. So this could look like a child who is obedient or like perfectionist for the sake of having
Just peace in the household.
yes, peace in the household.
Yeah.
That could be one of the ways it can look like. Although sometimes there might be children that might exhibit some aggressive behaviors and things like that. But it's regardless of what it is, it's a way where like the system is functioning together, if that makes sense. The dynamics of the family. So it's like everyone like has their role to play, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see.
Like there might be one sibling who's the caretaker, another sibling who's like the peacemaker, another sibling who's maybe always getting in trouble, and like that's the role that they play because there's an enmeshment in the family unit.
Yeah, it's like a living system.
It
all
is.
of it. Like
Yeah.
it's incredible. So now you have this kid coming from that, and then they're hitting their young adulthood, right? They go to college.
Right.
How is that now translating to loving relationships or friendships or something? How is that outside of the family dynamic? What happens then?
Yes. So let's assume that those wounds from childhood, right, that kind of had them exhibit these codependent patterns, let's assume that it wasn't resolved or it wasn't healed and they're still carrying it with them, right, into college and adulthood. What that might look like you're saying in a relationship?
Yeah,
Is that what-
sure. Like all of a sudden they're out of the household. How are they now in society, when they're young adults?
Right. Yes. So we're going to say like they're regular folks, right? Because just functioning well in society.
You can't tell maybe at some, like from the outside looking in, you can't tell.
No, you can't tell.
Okay.
You would be able to notice in maybe intimate relationships. So in romantic relationships, it could sometimes play out with friends or still play out with like their family, with their parents or caregivers. So you wouldn't be able to know unless you're really examining like their way of relating to friends or to specifically like romantic relationships, because that's usually when it comes out often.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's funny that before we even get to romantic relationships and codependency, I've seen it in friends. Like I've had friends who were completely like and I can see codependency pretty fast.
Yeah.
So I can see like, whoa, they're like trying to take up all my time very fast.
Right.
And then you look and you go, well, that person doesn't have really any other friends or
Right.
any other or a significant other. So it's like, whoa, like you're starting to see you're getting sucked into this codependency where you kind of got to
Right.
step back. And it's interesting when I set that boundary, like I'm going to step back. Like I can't do this. You can't get all my time. Come on.
Right. Yes.
There was a problem, right? Like all of a
Yeah.
sudden it became kind of weird.
Yeah.
And I can see how that works in even friendships. Do you see that for folks, or some of your clients, they exhibit that in friendships too?
Yes, and I think it's interesting that you bring up like when you set your boundary and like that person might not know how to receive that or something shifts within the friendship, because one of the challenges too with someone who has codependent patterns is that the boundaries are very blurred. So if they are not setting their own boundaries, when someone sets the boundary, it's for them. It's like, whoa, what is that? Oh, this is different, or like it might create some tension in the friendship, or not. But there's a shift usually.
Yeah. Does that show up like I need you to be here at this time? Like trying to take up someone's like
Yeah.
their whole
Okay. So it
day?
could show like yes, it could show up that way, but mainly where it shows up more is it's interesting. It's going back into that selfless caretaking giving type of thing, like trying to control, because that's one of the symptoms of codependent patterns is trying to control the other person in the way such as caretaking for the other person, and so wanting to do everything for maybe their friend.
So it doesn't have to be like control, like I need you here, like I need to talk to you at the phone.
No,
And
it,
can
it
literally
could,
be
it could, but it could look like that. Like I need you here, like I need this, and they
like
really
dependency,
take up
give
more.
me, yeah.
Yes, but it could look like other ways too, and control is well, that is I guess a form of control. Like I need you to be here, and
But they can also show up like as like overly, you're saying nurturing, like
yes, like
giving,
caretaking.
giving.
Yes, giving, because I'm trying to soothe something internally in myself.
Okay, yeah.
I'm trying to soothe, I'm trying to soothe my anxiety. I'm trying to do something internally. So I'm going to focus outside, and I'm going to give.
Just depends on their adaptation, basically. You're saying like how they show up. Like you were talking about family dynamic, right? Like
Right.
the perfectionist, the one who just
Yes.
rebels, the one who's always a giver. That
Right.
just still carry on depending on. It just
Right.
depends on who you are, like as a person.
Right, because some of them might not have, right, so some of them might not exhibit all symptoms of like codependent. They might, each person might have different patterns. But yes, depending on how things were in childhood and what the
Interesting.
wounding was in childhood. Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
So then we have like, okay, now friendships. What about now love? How does that show up in intimacy, loving relationships? Because this is the juicy stuff now we got to know
right.
about. I want to know, like, because I want to know if I've experienced it with anyone, and I might not have never even known.
Right. Yes. Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
know?
So, the way it would come out is there's almost like there's someone who's going to be the enabler, which is usually the person who's exhibiting codependent patterns. And then the other person's the one, usually it will be the partner, who is kind of receiving a lot of things from this other person. So what I mean by that is it could be that the one experiencing codependent patterns, like in this case, I'm just going to say like the woman, right? Because that's usually common in what it is that they're going to pretty much lose themselves in the relationship.
Fast too.
Very fast, for the purpose of soothing some internal anxiety that they may have. And so then their focus is going to be outward, and it's going to be, chronic, like I said, chronic self-neglect. And they might attract men who might be emotionally unavailable, or men who need them, because then they're playing that caretaker role. So it could be men who, I don't know, maybe like, I'm just going to say maybe they're unstable in their job as an example. And so then we have this person who's exhibiting codependent patterns, and they're helping them, and they're trying to fix them, and they're trying to control their reality. They're trying to do different things to maintain the relationship.
Like that dynamic, that living system too, that they want to maintain it with their role. And it's interesting you said the word attract, because that's
Yeah.
what happens. You attract someone that fits
Yes.
what you're basically supposed to heal. But
Yes,
a lot of us never
exactly.
look at it, right? We just go with
Right.
with our pathology, and we
Yes.
never heal it. But
Yes,
that's the
that's what I was going to
codependency
bring up.
you're saying.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to bring that up too. Yes. So Exactly. So pretty much what happens, it's like unconsciously, it's like, oh, this is familiar. I know this from when I was in childhood, when I had to act this way or perform this way for my parents' love type of thing. And so then in relationships, unconsciously, that's how it comes out. We either attract or are attracted to these partners that might kind of resemble what we know from childhood to try to heal it because we couldn't back then. And so then it plays out in relationships now.
Oh, I love that you said that because I always
Yeah.
say the universe is always looking to correct itself. Just like when we cut
Yeah.
our knee, it knows how to heal the knee. Well, it also
Yeah.
knows how to attract the people that need to correct and heal those emotional wounds, right? We have a physical wound,
Yes.
emotional wounds, we just don't see it, but we attract the people.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's what like we were talking about, like you have that codependency, like exactly what you need to heal, you're given this person that allows you to
Yes.
heal,
Yeah.
but unfortunately we just jump right back into like
Right. The
that wound
pattern.
scratching behavior,
Right. Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
and then we
Yeah.
experience that. So now you have, so let's say I'm codependent, right? Let's say I show up as someone who needs that nurturing from someone, and that someone is willing to give it. They're like, oh well, I'm a giver, I'm a nurturer, I'm going to
Right.
lose myself in this relationship, and I'm just going to be that person, because if I don't give and nurture, I might not survive.
Right.
And then for me, I'm like, if I don't get the nurturing and be, needy, then I might not
Yes.
survive.
Right.
So then let's say I come with my partner to you and I say, listen, this is something is happening and it's not healthy,
Right.
right? I have that awareness. Where do we go? Like, how do we start working on this?
Right. Okay. So you're saying you're the partner and you're coming and
The
telling.
codependency, both of us, we're just codependent with each other.
Right.
Like you mentioned, like talking through it may not be completely helpful.
Okay, yeah. So not that it might not be helpful, but the talking through we could address a little bit later. So
I
the
see.
first thing, let's assume. Okay, well, first of all, let's assume it's outside of therapy, right? So they're just two partners figuring out, hey, I think we have this pattern going on here. It's really becoming aware of what exactly is the pattern.
Okay.
It's really kind of digging into their past and becoming aware of, oh, wait a second. Oh, I know where this comes from. This comes from, X, Y, and Z. This comes from because, I always felt like I had to perform for love, as an example, right? So they're becoming aware of it and they're trying to shift the pattern. However, usually with this, it's helpful to have a mentor or a coach or a therapist to help the couple, or let's say individually, to bring more awareness into how to heal. This is kind of going into the nervous system and connecting with their bodies in order to start shifting the codependency.
And now this is really important what you're saying here, because especially when we're young, these traumas, they don't hang out in our brain cerebrally, right? They're in our body, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
we had a show with Tim Coleman many episodes ago who said the same thing. The trauma is
Yes.
stored in the body, right?
Yes.
In our DNA, it remembers.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you're now aligning exactly with what he said. Basically, you have to get into the body, get out the brain and get into the body, the nervous system particularly.
Yes.
So what type of things is this? This is called somatic work?
Yes.
And what does that even mean?
Right. So soma means the body, and we're working with the body to start connecting with the body, to start identifying, to getting pretty much getting to know how our nervous system works. So that's, I could say, if there's someone that's wanting to change the codependent patterns, it's really getting connected with the body to heal any type of past traumas or childhood woundings that they might have had. This could look like emotional woundings as well, right? Like if they, let's say they didn't feel safe as children to express their feelings, like maybe they had to, maybe they were shamed for just being themselves, meaning like just having feelings. That could be wounding. That could be traumatic. So and then that's stored in the body. So one way is to really get familiar with how your nervous system is working. So if you're noticing, anxiety or worry or racing thoughts, right? It's getting familiar with, oh, this is my fight or flight state, right? This is my flight or fight system. And if someone is mainly navigating, let's say, from that or kind of in that state for most of the time, then it's learning how can I regulate when I'm in my fight or flight versus seeing it as something negative of like, oh, I have anxiety or I have this worry when when I don't hear back from my partner, or I have this thing. So instead of viewing it that way as like, that there's something wrong with them because they feel that way. It's more so getting familiar with their body and why it's even doing that in the first place, why it's, let's say, acting anxiously in the first place, and not shaming it or shaming yourself for feeling that way or thinking that you need fixing when you don't, when it's just your body actually protecting yourself because it thinks that it's a perceived threat being in that relationship because it reminds them from like the past, let's say.
Right, right. So the body is saying, hey, remember me? This is the feeling that I had when I was 7 years old.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
it's being relived in the
Yes.
relationship, right?
Yes.
To heal, but now when we're older, we can cognitively heal and integrate it.
Right.
We're still reacting the same way, right? We're like, oh my God, this
Right.
is survival. I'm in fight or flight.
Right. And that's the body, right? Because like cognitively, we don't understand that
We don't
yet
understand
until
it.
we start working through it and become aware. And then yes, we're going to bring in more of like our higher brain, neocortex in the process of healing, but not just yet, because if it's still if the drive is still from that fight or flight state of like I need to fix it, I need to help him, and I need to control this and right, like all this. Anxious energy, then we need to go and regulate the body first. And but also just connecting, like I said, like really identifying, like, oh, wait a second, there's nothing wrong with me because I have this anxiety. This is my fight or flight. This is my body actually stepping in to protect me, right? Because this is survival, so it's protecting me because it thinks that I have to be in this fight or flight state. But actually, I don't, right? I don't need to be in this state, obviously, unless there is physical abuse happening or domestic violence, right? That's a little different.
That's a
but
different.
like, it's like, wait, I don't need to be responding from this state as I did when I was a child when I needed to do that to survive. So now I'm an adult. It's different. I don't need to be functioning from that state.
Yeah, you may have a very healthy, or you may have a relationship aside from the codependency that is like you have a great boyfriend or a great girlfriend, or they may
Right.
they may just trigger that part of you, and then all of a sudden you're like,
Yes.
oh my God, I gotta survive. Heart's
Yes,
racing,
exactly.
mind's racing, right?
Right.
You're not digesting your food anymore. You're sweating.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
But you're saying
So-
bring awareness to those triggers.
Right. So it's exactly. That's a great point. It's identifying, like, oh, wait a second. This is so identifying it that it's the fight or flight state. I think is really helpful versus like, oh, I'm worried and I'm feeling anxious and I don't know what's going on. And it's more of like, oh, wait a second. I think I'm in my fight or flight because I'm noticing that I'm anxious or I'm noticing that I'm having these racing and worried thoughts. So I must be in my fight or flight, which tells me that my body is probably thinking that something here is unsafe, but in reality, there's nothing here that's unsafe. So I'm going to use a regulating tool to help regulate my system. And then that way I can, if I need to, like I could talk about it with my partner once I'm online again to kind of rationalize these things. But first I'm going to do something to bring some regulation into my nervous system. Like that would be like the ideal self-talk process of someone who's, kind of going through that.
And I think, isn't it beautiful then when you have that trigger and then you do your first time ever working through that in your life, right? You had it
Yeah.
since childhood.
Yes.
You work through it in the body. And imagine how liberating it may feel to be like, holy crap, I have way more power in my state than I ever thought.
Yes, exactly. As an adult, because as children, we might have felt powerless in the situations that we couldn't
sure.
control and, all of that. So yes, now in adulthood, it's like, oh, wait, I have control over this. Or I'm working towards this. I'm working towards healing and shifting this.
So you bring awareness to that, you work through it. And as it becomes like a practice of ours, then we can start integrating that part of our body. And then showing up in a new way in the relationship? Is
Yes.
it simple as that, really? Just working through that body and then becoming a new you?
Yes. So that's a good point because there was actually another element that I was going to bring in that I think is important to understand too when we're talking specifically about like codependent patterns that show up in relationships. Because there's this younger wounding that happened, there's also this younger part of us or younger parts that we have that kind of step in. Like what you mentioned earlier, like that 7-year-old, it's like, whoa, wait a second. I know how to play this role very well. Or, oh, wait a second, this was like that one time when, dad would yell at us and we would get scared. And so there's this younger part also that needs healing.
I see.
So this is where we bring in some of that reparenting to ourselves as well.
Wow.
So it's getting connected with so I would have to say it's getting connected with the body, right? To bring regulation first to your nervous system, having that foundation. then working with the emotions of that and this younger part, the younger parts that kind of step in that sometimes might, like I say, take over and doesn't let the adult self kind of make the choices and decisions. So it's working through these younger parts that are wounded. And then from there, it's working towards this higher brain part, like the cognition, like, changing the thoughts, right? We're having negative thoughts, being able to change those thoughts, being able to talk ourselves through or talk ourselves out of, a perceived fear or whatever that means, or other negative self-talk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I know for a lot of listeners right now or viewers, they're like, oh my God, like this is exactly me. This is how
Yeah.
I've shown up in relationships. And you know
Yeah.
what? I've had that household when I was a kid.
Yes.
So I think you're offering a lot of hope because in this
Yeah.
podcast in itself, it's just bringing awareness. Like I
Yeah.
said, people are like, oh my God, this is me. Now to
Right.
know that we can like work through the body, work through the reparenting, and then bringing
Right.
it to our higher selves. So then we can show
Right.
up differently, completely different.
Exactly. Yes. Completely differently. Yes. It's important to have those three pieces there, like, regulation in our bodies to kind of heal the trauma that's coming up and showing up, healing the younger parts that were wounded in the past emotionally, and then lastly, kind of working through our with our brains and our thoughts and changing our thoughts and removing the negative self-talk or like the catastrophic thinking of like worst case scenarios and things like that.
For sure. And you're a testimony to it, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Because
Yes, because I definitely had codependent patterns, and it was since I was a teenager. I would see it consistently in relationships, consistently in these codependent patterns, and also with anxious attachment. And when I started seeing a somatic therapist and starting to learn, like, oh wait, this is having to do with my body, that was like the missing link, I guess, like we could say, right? Because I would listen to the podcast and I would watch the videos about codependency and trying to learn more, read a lot of books, implement some of the exercises. But it wasn't until I had a safe somatic therapist that I can relate with and relationally, because that's where the healing also came in. Having this other person that's really grounded in their nervous system, really safe and secure, that we can work through some of these things through the body.
Yeah.
And that's important to have someone that their nervous systems are also very regulated if you want to kind of work through this and heal through this.
Yeah, and I know everyone's different, but like how long
Yeah.
did it take you to like sort of start seeing results?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yes, everyone is different. I'm going to say for me, because I started seeing this therapist a month prior to when my boyfriend broke up with me. This was back in 2012. So that was in January. February 2012, my ex-boyfriend broke up with me, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm going to be alone, right? It's like the codependency kind of came in. And then it wasn't until maybe like, I would say maybe May, where it was like, oh, okay, like, wow, I'm starting to notice a shift. Like, there's no, I'm going to survive to be alone, right? Survival. Like, I'm okay. Like, nothing terrible is going to happen.
Yeah.
So it was, I would have to say it's a short amount of time
Wow.
for me,
Yeah.
because I was using a lot of these regulating tools. So a lot of it is also like practice and implementation.
Yeah. I notice even like in the body, right? Like if you eat really crappy, you don't drink water, those immediate interventions that are kind of small, like just drinking some more water or eating a little bit better, make huge difference. So I would
Yes.
think that it's in the same in like the mind-body part where you just
Right.
start seeing and then implementing, and like the first 6 weeks have to be huge.
Absolutely, yes. And when we're working with the nervous system, huge could be like a 1% increment of
Yeah.
shift, because we don't want to push the nervous system, right? We're working at that level. And so it needs to be really, I don't necessarily mean slow, but just subtle. The subtle shifts are like actually the big deal thing. Yeah. And then it gets bigger, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm a whole new person. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that X, Y, and Z. I don't do those patterns anymore, or I don't
Yeah.
have that anxiety as much anymore. Or, yeah.
So for everyone listening, they're like, oh my God, this is me to the T. How do
Yeah.
we just bring more love immediately to these folks?
Yes, more love
Just
to
self-love to
yeah,
themselves. Like, what are
self-love.
some of the things you...
Right. I know we hear that often, right? Like self-love, like what does this mean? And I like to help my clients, again, because we're wanting to really connect with the body first. We're wanting to bring self-love to our bodies. So one of the things that someone can practice daily is just kind of maybe doing some hand placements, right? Usually I have clients like place their right hand on their chest, maybe get the right hand on their belly or even like their face because we got some nerves there. And bringing in some regulation and just bringing some gratitude to those areas of the body. So an example, bringing gratitude towards your heart that like pumps the blood through there. So kind of just really focusing inward on how your body is supporting you is like one way that you could bring in more self-love.
Like literally just
Like
understanding that your body's working for you.
Yes, which it's almost like, well, duh, but then in a way, like a lot of us are really disconnected from our bodies.
For sure, for sure. Even me, if I'm running around all day, like I'm not thinking,
Yeah.
hey heart, thanks for pumping blood, or hey digestive system,
Right.
thanks for assimilating my
Yeah.
food.
Yeah. And I would say starting there because I know that the concept of self love is really, it's loose. And some people who are like, well, you just got to learn to put yourself first and love yourself. It's like, well, what does that look like? Like, I don't know how that, how that works. Right. So if someone is having these anxieties in relationships or codependent patterns, I suggest starting there first because there's a disconnect with the body versus
that.
someone that, like, let's say hasn't experienced maybe some traumas or some severe childhood woundings or something. Like, let's say someone doesn't exhibit anxiety or codependent patterns. For them, like it'll probably look very different. For them, they could probably do the concept of like what the self-love is of like, yeah, just put yourself first and do that stuff. But for those that are having these codependent patterns and anxieties in relationships, it's really important to connect with the body.
Such an important point that you're saying because we're bringing it back to the nervous system, right?
Yes.
Again, the body is holding and storing that trauma.
Right.
So let's like even feel our heartbeat. Let's feel our digestive system.
Yes,
on
they
our
just
hands.
exactly. Or feeling like placing our hands on our rib cage and saying, "Wow, thank you, rib cage, for protecting, my lungs and my liver," or just really like, thanking the body for how it's working for you.
Yeah, that body work's really important. Like it wasn't until recently where I realized like, whoa, I haven't been like, I've been loving my mind and soul, but like, what about my body? So I even take
Yes.
like 15 minutes every morning and I lay
Yeah.
down on a couch and
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm
That's
like,
amazing.
oh God, like I didn't know my
Yeah.
stomach is kind of off today. Right?
Right.
So just bringing awareness to the body, I think is so important. If you're doing
Yes.
all the other things like meditation, right, and breath
Right.
work, you got to do the body stuff too.
Exactly. Yes.
know?
And one of the things that I learned in my practice and just studying and researching and reading is that we need to bring in specifically, again, if we're talking about those who are having anxiety in relationships and these codependent patterns, we need to bring in the regulation before we can bring in relaxation. So I have a lot of clients, for example, that might have a lot of anxiety that say meditation isn't working for me, as an example, right? Or like, meditation is one of the first ones that comes in. They might say meditation isn't working for me. And we could see that meditation is used as more of like a relaxation. And if they don't have regulation, then the relaxation isn't going to work, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
they need,
for sure.
So they need to bring in the regulation first. Okay, let's regulate the nervous system first. And then these other relaxing activities, then those can be more effective.
Right. A lot of people are like, I can't meditate, and it's because their nervous system is like locked
Yes,
into
it's activated.
sympathetic.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you got to break that and then get into the
Right.
relaxation.
Right. One of the things that I really want to emphasize that there's nothing wrong with a person who's experiencing these anxieties or codependent patterns, right?
No.
It makes sense why they would do that, right? It's about survival, and it's about breaking these old patterns from childhood,
Yeah.
and the woundings, and it's just kind of bringing it back into really connecting with the body and understanding that their body is always working for them. So when they're in that fight or flight mode, when they're feeling anxious, their bodies are always working for them. And thinking, the body's wanting to protect and saying, hey, we need to kick up fight or flight right now.
Yeah.
Because this doesn't feel safe, right?
100%. And it's not, look, it doesn't even have to manifest as codependency. Like, there's so much crap that happens when we're kids. 'Cause we're
Yes.
so sensitive and open,
Right.
open-hearted, open-minded,
Exactly.
innocent, that
Yes.
really even small traumas, doesn't even have to be a family dynamic. Like, even small little
Right.
traumas, like something that happened that you saw at a grocery store, or something that someone told
Yes,
you when you were a
vicarious
kid.
trauma.
We
Yes.
carry these things. So,
Right.
bringing like just compassion and be like, shit, like I was just an open-hearted kid. Like,
Yes,
at peace.
compassion is so important, and patience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and patience.
absolutely.
So, but I love that you brought awareness to the body and you're bringing that to the viewers and listeners. Is that like,
Yeah.
let's start with the body, because cerebrally, you can't just cognitively try to put concepts on things
Right.
without like liberating the stuff that's stuck in the body. right?
Right.
Got to go to the body before you even start cognitively going through, talk
Right.
therapy is great, but the root is in the body.
Yes, and it's really challenging to have your brain tell your body, can you just calm down?
Right.
It's two different languages.
Right.
Like the body's like, I don't understand what that means.
Survival.
So then regulation it's what's needed.
Yeah, imagine running away from a lion, and while you're running, your body's
Yeah.
like, your brain's like, can you just calm down? Your body's
Right.
like, no, hell no, I gotta hop this
Right,
fence.
exactly.
It's unbelievable. So I loved this conversation. I really did. This is up my alley. Like I love
Yes.
love talking about this. You're here in LA,
Yes.
and how can people in LA find you, or you even do virtual, right? You said.
Yes, I do virtual as
So
well.
anyone who's listening, how do they find you?
Yeah, you can go on my website, www.loveshustle.com, and I hang out on Instagram a lot, so at loves.hustle.
And you have some really good posts, like reminiscent of holistic psychologist. She does like
Yeah.
very beautiful graphics like you,
Yes.
talking about compassion, intimacy,
Yes.
love,
Yeah.
codependency, everything.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I love this work.
And any plans for the future? Like what are you doing that we can look forward to, or just doing your thing?
Yeah. I mean, I've been working on doing a free workshop on anxious attachment to just kind of help clients, give them some tools to use. And so that's been a little bit delayed because I'm focusing a lot on my clients that I have now. But yeah, in the future, I would love to do retreats and kind of just help women connect with themselves, heal these codependent patterns. But for now, just continuing to see clients online.
No, I would love for you to do the retreats. I have like a whole Instagram following of people who would want to be there. So I love that you came on the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me here.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
What a great conversation between us two. I mean, that you learn something every day, but that was so powerful because I've seen it in my life with partners, even partly in me, and just bringing awareness to the function of how trauma affects folks long term, but how we can heal it. That's the empowering part, right? We got the empowerment right now. We can heal that. So yeah, thank you all for listening. I really appreciate you. Rate, review, subscribe, and thank you.